How can we surrender to life? How can we let life do what it needs to do through us? How can we become part of the play of creation? Hello and welcome to Stories of the Journey Home. My name is Leo Sofa and I have a story for you today on those themes. I'm an intuitive storyteller, which means that when I sit down to tell a story, I have no idea what's about to come. But the images come in a stream that's unexpected, unpredictable, and I simply follow. That's just my job, is to follow what I see without second guessing it and without taking it somewhere that it's not going. I've been doing this work for many, many years, and what I find is the juicier the questions, the juicier the stories. Well, I got a really juicy story today for you, and because I came into my meditation hut with a juicy question. In fact, it was just this morning. And the question was kind of as I was just outlining. And in my own experience, it's very much been the question of how can I serve the purpose that I have in my life the very best? How can I surrender to that purpose? How can I become a vessel? I've been an intuitive storyteller for 20 years or something like that. I've been storytelling for over 25. And it's always been a bit of a thing for me of what do I do with this? How do I get this work out? How do I let these stories go where they need to go? Because there's definitely always been a sense of this isn't me. This isn't my mind making up a cool story. This is something that comes to me unmistakably as a message, as a gift. And I know you can read it in all the books. My purpose is to be a channel. Our purpose is to be a channel for divine inspiration, or just to let life flow through us. But how? That's been very much a struggle for me over the years of how to get out of the way. Well, this morning I felt very ripe with something. I felt very ripe with a story based on a question that I hope will be relevant to you as well. Because the question I came into my meditation hut with was, how do you surrender? When you can feel that the universe wants to flow through you in a way that you're only getting in the way of it when you try and plan it out or think it through. How do you let go? How do you enter into the stream of life where what the universe wants from you will just happen, and where you can play your part as in the way that you're intended to play your part? I was very ripe with all of those questions and just kind of laid it out. I kind of speak it out for my intuition as if I was speaking to a friend and saying, look, this is the story, this is the question that I'm with, and bring me a story that's going to address that. So that's what happened, and the story that came is the story I'm about to tell you. Once upon a time, there was a boy. A boy possessed of amazing artistic ability. He lived on a farm in a poor village, but whatever he could scratch together, he would use for the most amazing paintings and drawings that anybody had ever seen. His mother and his father were rather baffled by this. Shouldn't this boy be helping on the farm? And yet the whole time, all he wanted to do was just take whatever he could find, little bits of charcoal that he'd find in the forest after the charcoal burner had gone, little bits of straw and shafts of wheat, and he would just take them and he would scratch on whatever he had available, whether it was pieces of stone or pieces of paper, and he would create such things of such beauty they were. He would create such amazing beauty that the whole village would gather round and they would simply stare. And although they had never been to art galleries and they had never seen fantastic pieces of work, they knew this was beautiful. And yet the farmer was still saying, well, you know, I need my son to help around the house. He's a strapping lad now, and I need him to help around the farm and with the animals, and I can't have him just painting and drawing all the time. But the villagers, they said, listen, you've got something special on your hands, you ought to nurture it. Well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to feed my family? Said the farmer. And there was one woman in the village, she said, let me take care of this. And she was an old, rather wise woman, and she went off. She went off to where the Lord had his mansion. And she knew the Lord somewhat, and he had over the years come to trust her. She went to the Lord, she said, listen, there's something very special in the village. You have to see it. And when she told him the whole story, the Lord said, well, I'm very busy, but well, I can fit you in next Wednesday. She said, next Wednesday is fine. Well, I look forward to seeing you. Truth was, it didn't make any difference when he came. The boy was always there, always painting. And between that conversation and next Wednesday, he had already created several stunning pieces of work. When the Lord came to the village finally, he was ushered through the village and shown the farmhouse where the boy lived. And there he was shown into the room where the boy did his work. And there he beheld such beauty, It were as if the universe was speaking through that boy. Such beauty as struck him down and touched his heart. And he found himself saying, we have to do something with this. We have to do something with this. Let me think about it and I'll be back. And he goes away and he thinks about this and he's thinking, this is just a poor boy from a farm. He's a peasant who in the courts of the kingdoms around here will recognize such a talent. They expect artists to be finely bred. They expect them to at least have had an education, to know of the great works. This boy, he won't get accepted like this. He won't be accepted. What am I to do? What am I to do? And in truth, he was a good man. He could see that there was real beauty and real gift here, but he knew that given the age that he lived in, he needed somehow to find a way of the boy's work getting accepted. And then he had an idea. You see, he had a son. And his son was a good lad, and he'd done his best to follow in his father's footsteps and take all the right education and do all the right things. And yet he was still looking for his vocation in life. He hadn't quite found it. And the father was constantly suggesting this and that, but the boy was a little bit dreamy and a little, not quite a waster, you could say, but hadn't quite found his thing yet. The father said, listen, I've got something that I'd like your help with. It's a bit unusual, but if you can help me with this, the benefits to the world will be enormous. Well, what is it, Father? Said the boy. Come with me. I have to show you it. And so he takes the boy. He takes his son into the village and he shows him the young lad's work there in his little farmhouse. And the Lord's son, he's struck dumb just like his father was. He's gone to all the right art galleries. He's seen all the fine things in all the kingdoms for miles around. And he knows beauty when he sees it. Indeed, what he sees there is transcendent. He says, Father, this is amazing, but what can I possibly do? How can I help? The Lord says, I want you to pretend to be the artist. We will take this boy's work and I would like you to present it to the king." "What?" said the boy. "You can't be serious. How could I be such an impostor?" "Hear me out," says the Lord. "No one will accept that such a peasant as this could have created such beauty. If you, however, with your breeding and your standing, present such work at court, it will be received, and the whole world will get to hear about it." Well, it takes a while for the son to finally take the argument, but eventually he does. Eventually he does, and he takes a great portfolio of this work because the boy in the village is constantly producing it. He takes a portfolio of the most sublime pieces and he takes them to the king's palace. And inevitably he is received. Once the king receives him, he is received with such honor and amazement and glory. Everybody is saying, "We have a genius, we have a new talent in the kingdom, this is amazing." And the Lord's son, he's taking all of this and he's feeling a little bit uneasy about it, but soon the nice women of the court are saying what a fine artist he is, and won't he be coming back next week, and it's been so lovely to have fresh blood in the palace, and he starts to rather enjoy this, and he goes home singing, and he says to his father, "This is amazing, Father. I've always wanted this kind of recognition. I've always wanted people to look at me and say, there's a fine, successful man. I love this, Father. Let's keep doing it." So the Lord, he nodded his head and he said, "Well, very well, let's just wait for the next pieces of work." And sure enough, a month goes by and there's another bursting portfolio of the most amazing work that makes you swoon. It's so beautiful, indeed better than the previous batch it was. And so the son, the Lord's son, he takes this to the court, and there once again everybody is swooning over how beautiful this is. But it can't go on like this, because the work, as if in response to all the reception it's getting, all the adulation it's getting, the boy's work simply gets more and more sublime. Sublime it is. You see it and you are transcended. You are transfixed and ascended and, well, whatever it is. You just go beyond yourself. And the Lord's son, he just can't keep it up. This work is too beautiful. He just can't keep up the facade. Even though by now there are many women in court who have already made it quite plain to him they would love to have him as their husband. He cannot pull it off. The more in awe he becomes of the work that he is pretending to be the author of, the harder it is, the more his integrity is aching inside. And he goes to his father. He says, "Father, I just can't do this. I can't do this anymore. It's immoral, it's wrong, it's untruthful. I am not the author of this work." And the Lord, he just nodded. And he said, "My son, come with me." And he'd been seeing this coming, had the Lord, because he knew his son had a good heart. And he knew he had a strong sense of integrity. So he took him back to the village. And you know, by now, as if the boy knew that his work was receiving this kind of reception, he was creating work that was quite sublime. The more his work got out into the world, the more it seemed to draw forth work that was utterly extraordinary. He knew nothing of the whole plan, and he didn't know what was happening to his work out there in the world. The Lord wasn't telling him. And in his ignorance, and with the work being received as it was, without him even knowing, he was becoming more and more of a vessel. He was becoming more and more transparent. He was kind of in a trance most of the time. He would simply wake up with his head filled with things to paint, and he would just paint them as if he wasn't there. And this is what the Lord wanted his son to see. He said, come with me, come and look at this. And the two men, they just sat at the back of the studio that was now set aside for the boy in the farmhouse. And they just watched. And after several hours, the Lord's son, he turns to his father. He says, Father, he's just like me. The father nodded. He's just like me. He's not even the author himself. It's just coming through him. Look at him. He's not even conscious of what he's doing. Who is to say that he's the author any more than I am? I will be like him, he said. I will be like him. So he went back. He went back to the palace. He went back to the palace and he started to show this most amazing work. And now he did not take any of the praise for himself. The little gestures and the smiles and the appreciation, he just let it slide off him. Because now he was quite clear what his role was to be. He was simply the carrier. He was the means whereby this work got out into the world. It wasn't about him. Well, this went on very, very well. This went on very, very well. And just as had been the case before, now the work became more and more sublime. The more people who got to hear about it, the more sublime it became. Everything could have carried on quite magnificently, except for one day, everything seemingly went completely wrong. Because the king, oh yes, he wasn't past taking the credit for stuff. Oh no. Word had got around that he had the most amazing artist and everybody was talking about how great his work was. And so he had invited several dignitaries from other lands. And they'd all gathered and been told that they would receive a performance from this marvelous artist who would sketch in front of them his latest wonderful creation. Well, when the Lord's son hears this, can you imagine? He's running around the Lord's mansion like a chicken with his head cut off. He's utterly beside himself. He's squawking and shouting. And can you imagine a man of integrity like that, who's nonetheless put himself in a position like he has? What's happening now? He's going berserk. Well, the Lord, who's a wise man, he says, my son, do not worry about anything. What do you mean, says the son? What, I'm going to be found out. I've probably been put in jail or something awful like that. Calm down, says the Lord. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. How can you say that? Says the son. I promise you. Take your drawing utensils and your best paper and go to the king's palace and draw and see what the moment brings you. But I don't know how to draw, he says. See what the moment brings you, says the Lord. And there was something in his voice. There was something in his warm smile, in his confidence, that reassured his son enough that the boy, the young man, made his way to the palace. And there he was shown into a marvellous, lovely room, and there were all kind of fluffy, puffy people on fluffy, puffy chairs and couches and looking very smart and posh and expecting and rather in awe of this marvellous artist whose work they had seen and been so impressed by. The king, aha, here's my marvellous artist, always making it a nice thing for himself. Oh yes, a nice thing for himself. Do come and show the people what you can do. And so the young man, the Lord's son, he goes and he has his best pens and his best drawing chalks, and he goes to the paper that's been set up there. and something amazing happens. Back in the village. Back in the village. The boy is possessed of a simple sketch that he suddenly realizes he must do. And he puts aside whatever it was he was doing before, and he starts to sketch with a sure line, a simple line. And there off in the palace, miles away, the Lord's Son, that young man of such integrity, he feels his hand gripped and moved by a force he does not know. And when the boy moves, so moves the Lord's Son. Until there is there upon the page such a beautiful sketch that everybody there, they recognize it immediately of the artist they know so well. And this is so amazing for the Lord's Son that he does it every week. Every Sunday evening, he takes out his papers and he takes his drawing materials and he starts to draw with the same sense of reverence that he had that day at the King's Palace. He draws, and every Sunday evening, the poor boy in his village, he's gripped by this sudden urge of needing to draw right there and then. And the two young men, they draw in tandem with one another and create beautiful works. Well, one day there's a bit of a terrible thing going through the whole countryside, and the people are catching a terrible illness, and it's laying waste to various villages, and those who can't get proper doctors, why, they're dead within a couple of days. And that's exactly what happens to the boy, the farmer's son, the peasant who lived in the village. He's dead before anybody could reach him or help him. But even then, our friend, the Lord's Son, he sits down and he draws. And the same thing happens as when the boy was alive. Some mysterious force moves his hand from where he doesn't know. From where he doesn't know. And I dare say he created rather a lot of lovely pieces of work. I dare say they were very, very fine. In fact, I was passing by one gallery one day when I saw some, and I thought to myself, such good pieces of work they are, such I cannot bear to leave them on the wall. And so I nipped in past the security guards and I snatched it off the wall and I ran with it under my arm and I ran through the streets until suddenly you stopped me. And I said, "What?" You stopped me and said, "What are you doing and where are you going with that work? It's not yours." And I said, "But I love it." "Well, then do something with it," they said. You said, do something with it. I said, I don't know what to do with it. Here, you have it. Thanks for listening to my story. It's been fun to tell it. This has been my first video story that I've ever made, and it's been fun to tell in this way. I've enjoyed also talking about how the story came and talking about and then telling the story. As for what the story means, I'm going to leave that to you. I love it. I find it very, very beautiful in terms of affirming, guiding the way for me in the sense of getting out of the way and not making it about myself. It's not even about any of us, really. And I hope this story helps you get a sense of that in your own life too. If you want to find out more about my work, you can go to my website, storiesofthejourneyhome.com. If you'd like a story that's on a theme that is for you pertinent, then get in touch. I also run courses to teach people how to tell their own stories using the intuitive storytelling method. Thanks very much for watching. It's been my pleasure. All the best for now. Bye-bye.